First John chapter 2. We're gonna, I don't know if we will on this one or the next one. We're gonna try and land the plane a good bit here on chapter 2. We're in the last two verses, verse 28. And now, dear children, those two words, John uses them a lot. And tradition says that's, you know, that was his favorite thing to call people, my dear children. My dear children, continue in him, so that when he appears, we may be confident and unashamed before him at his coming. I read a book a few years ago that I can't say it actually changed my life, but it did change my perspective on leading and on developing and in a personal way and organizationally. And the title of the book is Start With Why. A guy named Simon Sinek wrote it. Now, I don't agree with everything Simon Sinek says, but I have become a bit of a fan. And really, this idea of start with why is profound. Essentially, I would boil it down to this. If you know your why and you can adequately and clearly articulate why, then you'll be able to execute the what and the how. It does start with what do you want, but then you've got to step back to why do you want that? A lot of times we'll say, here's what we want, and we'll go right to the how. One of the difficulties with that is that often the more significant the what is, the more complex and difficult the how will be. Sinek's idea is understand why you want to do this. And if the why is compelling, when you hit those bumps, when you hit the obstacles, when you hit the hindrances, as you execute on how, you have motivation to continue. But if your why is not strong enough, then you'll poop out. I mean, that. How often do you see that in your own life? I see it in my life all the time. Here at the beginning of the year, a lot of people are, and I'm in this category. I am a New Year's resolution guy. I haven't always been. And I have friends who they hate New Year's resolutions because why make a resolution when you know you're not going to make it? When you're not going to complete it. You're not going to fulfill the resolution. And I get that. And frankly, I don't achieve all my resolutions, but my thought is it's probably better to make a resolution and have a target than to have no target at all. The old saying is, if you have no destination, any road will do. I want to have a destination, and I want to have a why for that destination. Well, in the verse we're looking at today, John gives us a why. So that. Continue in him so that. Here's a big why. And it's honestly, it's a ways out there. Although, well, let's come back. So that when he appears, we may be confident and unashamed before him at his coming. So that when he appears, don't make sure we get the time frame and the context right here. When he appears. Now, there are two senses at least in which when he appears would fit. First is the end of time, when Jesus splits the clouds, and according to the angels at his ascension, he said, hey, this same Jesus is going to return in the way that he left, right? He's going to come in the clouds. When? We don't know. But when he does, we do know this much. He'll come as a conquering king. I love that little saying that, when he comes back, he won't be coming back as a baby in a manger. He'll be coming back as the king, the conquering king. And John in the book of Revelation draws a word picture that seems, to some of us, may seem grotesque when he talks about the king riding on a white horse. His robes are dipped in blood. There's a sword coming out of his mouth. Well, whether that's a literal picture or a figurative picture, I leave to brighter minds than my own. But what I do know, when Jesus returns, he won't be sneaking in under the radar, and he won't be apologizing. He'll be coming as a conqueror. There is that time. I don't know when it will be, but there is that time. And as a believer, I don't want to live every day in fear of Jesus' return. There ought to be a sense of anticipation and hope and excitement about his return. But that's a difficult thing when you're really tied into what's going on, what you've got going in your life right now. When I was younger, I didn't have near the enthusiasm for the return of Jesus that I do now as an old guy. When I was a little kid, it scared the poo out of me. And basically, all I ever heard about the return of Christ was the horrible conditions on the earth, and how the tribulation was going to be terrible for anybody left behind until his return. And it scared me. There's no question. It is frightful. Then I eventually got to know God and his word enough, accepted Christ, and really my motivation for becoming a Christian was real simple. Didn't want to get left behind, and I didn't want to go to hell. So there you go. When I was a kid, honestly, let's be realistic. Do you need any more intelligent of a motivation than that to say yes to Jesus when you're a kid? I loved him. Well, anyway, then I got where I was raising the kids and involved in a ministry career, and I was intent on being a success, and I had lots to cling to. And the thought of Jesus returning and me not getting to do this stuff was kind of put a damper on the celebration. Well, now there are a lot of days, really, and I know I've heard old guys say this and always thought when I was younger, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. But there are a lot of days I have thought, Lord, it would be fine with me if today was the day that you returned. Now, there is another aspect of when he is revealed, when he appears. And I almost experienced this about 10 years ago. I've told you the story of my heart attack, and I hadn't planned on a heart attack. And when I woke up that morning, I didn't know I was going to have a heart attack. The truth is, when I had what my cardiologist called an asymptomatic heart attack, I felt this stress in my chest. I didn't even know at that point I was having a heart attack. I just thought I was getting the flu when I got so nauseous and so clammy and felt awful. Didn't know. If it hadn't been for God's providence, his care, his goodness, and putting my friend Danny with me, I would have died on January 10th, 2011. But I didn't. Now, if I had, I think he would have appeared For me, that would have been the end. And at the end, that's when he was going to appear, right? if he appears before my death, well, my life's over anyway, right? If I die before his return, then my life's over, and I think I will experience his appearing at that point. Here's the thing. There are very few people who get to choose the day they will die and the means by which they will die. One of my favorite contemporary, well, it's not contemporary so much anymore because it's old by now, but one of my favorite songs was by Rich Mullins, and it was Elijah. When I die, I want to go out like Elijah, with a whirlwind to fuel my chariot of fire. Which Rich was masterful at drawing pictures with his words, vivid pictures. But that's not how Rich went. He went in a car accident when he was thrown out of his Jeep because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He didn't get up that morning, I'm reasonably sure, and say to his friend Beaker, hey, just so you know, this is my last day. I'm going to die when I get thrown out of this Jeep. Almost nobody gets to choose the day, the time, and the means. Now, there are people who have committed suicide and they made what I think is a horribly wrong choice about the day, the time, and the means. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about us. We don't get to choose it. In both cases, when he appears, we need to, on one level, all of us need to be living and thinking in terms of if he returns now, I want to be prepared. How do I prepare for that? John says, you continue in him, right? You can make a big deal of this and how it could be very complex and very deeply theological and philosophical, or else it could just be continue in him. Keep doing in him the things you have been doing in him, so that when he appears, and whenever that is, whether it's at my death or whether it's at his return, we may be confident and unashamed before him at his coming. I want to be able to live my life in a way that I can be confident and unashamed. All right, now, I'm going to start splitting hairs here, so I'll kind of give you a little spoiler alert. If this is about me performing up to a standard, I'm toast. So are you. There's none of us that can perform up to that standard. But if it is about God's grace and the power of his grace to work in and through us to reflect his nature, we can all do that. And as I cooperate and partner with and permit the grace of Christ to transform and shape and mold me, as I do that, I can have a growing confidence, not in myself, but a confidence in what God can and is doing in me. Right? Wouldn't it be great to be able to stand before Christ unashamed? There are things I've done that I'm ashamed of. But once those things have been forgiven and eradicated by his grace, I don't need to feel shame anymore. I might feel regret that I did those, I don't have to feel shame. One of the great gifts that God has given us in salvation is that we can, on the basis of His goodness, His grace, His work, not ours, we can be confident, not ashamed, before Him at His returning. Well, pick it back up next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.